It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for our weekly legislative update. Tonight, we hear from the Democratic side of the aisle on recently passed election changes and a proposed immigration bill. Joining us now is Senator Priya Sundaresan and Representative Jennifer Pollock. Good to have you both here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Senator, we're going to start with you in this bill. I think you had a lot to do with this, so I want to get some of your impressions on the election changes that were made, because election changes were made and they weren't such good changes. Talk to us about this.
Sure, yes. I think we found ourselves in this pickle this year because of the 2022 law that expanded the recount margin by which, close races would have to go into automatic recount. Counties came to us in the fall to the legislature and started talking to us about changes that would need to be made in order to find additional days in order to be able to conduct the possible number of recounts that would have to happen, especially at the statewide level, the possibility of having our presidential electors not being sent to the Electoral College. But, thanks to consistent negotiation, we were able to pass the bill last week, and I think it's fair to say, from the Democratic perspective, we think that we were able to save democracy in Arizona by fixing the number of days that were needed and ensuring that voters were not harmed in the process. And in fact, we'll find out that we were able to make it so that more eligible voters will be confident that their votes were counted.
Yeah, and there is some concern, though, that this does not make it easier to vote. And there might be some people, especially with curing times and these sorts of things in rural areas, especially Navajo Nation reservation. This does not make things easier. Do they have a point?
Maybe a little bit. We did hear from our members from the Navajo Nation, Representative Sosi and Representative Peshlakai, that the Navajo Nation conducts their own elections on the 6th of August, so they would need to move their elections so that the people on the nation don't have to vote twice in a week's time. So I know that the leadership up there now is negotiating and trying to figure out if they are able to move their elections to align with our new date, which will be July 30th.
Yes. Signature verification was also involved in the negotiations and this new bill. And again, some folks were thinking, this doesn't sound necessarily like it's making it easier to vote. Your thoughts?
So I think that was part of the negotiation process. Unfortunately, we were able to get it to a place where we felt comfortable that, yes, these signature verification guidelines were codified into statute, but these are signature verification provisions that were based on Secretary Hobbs' own signature guidelines, and we were clear to say that this should not be the basis for additional litigation to challenge additional voters' ballots. So on the whole, even with the change in the primary date and the change to the cure period, there were additional provisions that we got in there to make sure that voters had more access, that their eligible ballots could be counted, that they weren't going to be thrown out unnecessarily.
Was there any talk about just rescinding the law and going back to the way it was?
We certainly felt that that should have been part of the discussion. We were told from the outset that the majority was not willing to have that discussion. I think had we had that discussion, I think we might have had a little easier process to get to yes. But on the whole, the outcome that we have in this bill is quite good, and I think we can, voters can feel confident that their vote has been protected.
And the conversations in the House, what did you hear, what was heard? And obviously from the Democratic perspective, were there folks in your caucus that basically saying, I'm not crazy about this?
There certainly were people who were saying they weren't crazy about it, but thanks to the negotiations with Senator Sundaresan and Representative Tarek, we felt like the must-haves were included. So we were comfortable in supporting the bill.
Yeah, and I noticed that some of this stuff reverts back to the way it was in 2026. What was the idea there?
Yeah, the 2026 aspect, I think, that was a portion that in the final bill we removed because there was discussion about moving the primary even after this year in 2026 to May. We need to have that discussion. That's still a ways off, and so we may have to come back again next year and discuss when the primary, how early that needs to be moved. But For this year's purposes, this bill
Right.
didn't change anything post-2026.
Using state and county buildings maybe as polling sites in future elections, that was okay by you?
Oh, absolutely. I think that was that's something that was a great improvement from the original version of the bill, which would have conscripted schools to act as that purpose without kind of the approval of their own administrators and teachers. This is a better version, and honestly, as we know, vote by mail in Arizona is the #1 source of voting, and so that continues. Voting by mail remains the best option for voters.
All right, we will see how things go here once we start hitting primary season. Representative, let's talk about it's HB 2748. I hope we don't think of this, who knows, this might be a new number that we remember, similar to SB 1070. Sounds like this legislation is similar to SB 1070. What's this all about?
Well, it is very similar, and what I would like to say is I think that it's really a shame that in Congress that our Republicans blocked the bill from being passed, because immigration really is a federal issue, and it would be great to have a nationwide law rather than a patchwork of state-to-state laws.
Right, but that's not happening, at least not right now.
Not right now.
And this basically says that immigration becomes a state law. Misdemeanors, felonies, it's all lined out here.
It is, and my colleagues who serve on the committee are very concerned that it's unconstitutional, just like we saw with 1070 10 years ago.
Yeah, Senator, what do you make of this? Is this the governor, I doubt seriously if she's going to hold a parade and sign this thing. What's going on here?
Yeah, I have to agree. Our Latino caucus has come out very strongly against this bill. It's a rerun of SB 1070. We saw what that did to Arizona communities. Even when that was going through, I was living here and worried about what I might have to be carrying at any time if I went running and needed to produce my papers somehow because of the color of my skin. And so it is even worse, however, than SB 1070 because right now, we already have the constitutionality of SB 1070 decided. It's unconstitutional. To be bringing that kind of attack on our population again is simply flying in the face of that. It's a racist approach.
And yet Republicans at the state capitol are calling it vital legislation and saying that the consequences are dire because there is a, quote, uncontrolled tide of illegal immigration.
I think that is, they may try to justify it however they may, but this is a attack on people based on their skin color, right? This is potentially something that makes people live in fear for having to justify their existence in this country, and that's not what we should be standing for.
Last word on this, Representative. I think Republicans would say it would be attack on people on their skin color. It would be attack on people who have gotten here by illegal purposes. How would you respond to that?
I think it would be hard for law enforcement to tell if somebody was here from another country or if they were born here in Arizona. Just by looking at them, there's no way they would know.
Do you believe, and you started off by talking about Congress, and we'll end the conversation
Yes.
here. Is this entirely a congressional matter, a federal matter? Should the state have absolutely nothing to do with this issue?
Maybe the state should support what they're doing federally, but I think that the law needs to come from Congress.
All right, we'll stop it right there. Representative Jennifer Pollack and Senator Priya Sundaresan. Good to have you both here. Good to
Thank
meet you both as
you.
well. Thanks for being here.
Thank
Thank you.